Friendly Ed Wells here, just checking in halfway home from my trip to WMAW 2024. Well, this is the kind of event that there's just too much to talk about in just a brief video. I don't know that I'll make a longer one because, most of my insights aren't really anything different than what most people will say. It's a good event. Everyone should go at least once. But beyond that, I do have two observations, and I'll limit it to two. On my drive home, I've had plenty of time to reflect, literally, and think about a few thoughts that I would like to share with the broader community, such as exists on my YouTube page. First of these, which was repeated many, many times at WMAW, is the grand importance and much, much, much appreciation from everyone involved for squires during the deeds of arms. There were two deeds of arms, the main one and the mini. I squired in the main one and received a lot of good positive feedback from the knight whom I provided services for. And every other companion who fought in the deed was also very complimentary and well received and well taken care of by their squires. And then the mini deed, I had someone squiring me, several people actually helping out, mainly with taking the damn helmet off, which made everything so much more bearable. So again, everyone who squired, everyone who saw people squire, thank you very much from the bottom of my massive heart. Now, second point I want to make was a fun confluence of how classes interacted with each other, and I would say unintentionally. I don't think anybody planned it this way. So I took three classes which I'd like to reflect on and sort of tie together in a sort of cohesive manner. And this is an impromptu video, so this is just going to be a loose collection of thoughts. Maybe something a little more detailed later. And my apologies if I get anybody's names wrong. Don't look at me, it's not me doing it. Maybe get a lozenge for that. So the first class was James Riley. And let me not repeat titles, but basically the class was an approach to how to observe your opponent and to see what they're doing and how they react to you, and then use that as a strategic core in which to build appropriate responses, to take advantage of the opponent, and to build correct action. Now James's background, at least as presented in this course, is mainly KDF, so the Lichtenauer tradition. And terms are provided in the German Lichtenauer tradition. Me being a dirty little Fiorist meant that I had some stuff to learn, and I certainly did. I have finally learned what a flug on the right is and how to actually maybe one day be able to do it fluidly and smoothly and correctly, but I have some instruction on that now. But more important was the observation of how the 5 words in the Lichtenauer tradition, which I know 4 maybe, but how things like weak and strong in the presence of a bind affect how you do things. Now, us Fiorists would call that Fiori's first master of Largo, Jovo Largo. See, told you it was impromptu. But more so, the interesting was the way that allows you in real time, with practice, of course, and this thought pattern to make tactical decisions. And that's something that's baked into my school of St. George. Very much that's something that's baked into our curriculum, if maybe not framed exactly the same way, which means I think that we have some room to advance our understanding and to apply some other analyses which can improve things. So, moving on. Second class was John O'Meara, whom I have not met before, but he comes from an Italian rapier background. And his class was about moving in tempo. Now, tempo, typically people think of measure, distance between people and measure in terms of time. But John was very quick to point out that these are not the only ways to think about tempo. And tempo is not just the space of any action, it's the space of actions to which you are, let's say, reacting to. Apologies, again, this is impromptu. So every tempo has, other than tempos in which you're pausing It has an action and a stop. So something is going on, and then you're resettling your mass if you've made a movement. And the end of it, the basic goal was to work within the tempo that your opponent is providing. They're setting basically the pace of the dance. You were following that dance, and then you lead them into a position in which you can break the tempo and turn the tables on them. In other words, using timing and measure to your advantage, even if you are following your opponent. I thought this was interesting. Again, the overriding theme is that this is a tactical observation decision-making framework in which you are using time and distance instead of just things like binding on the weapon, but you're using time and distance against your opponent to set up what you wish to do, what effect you wish to have. I will say, of the 3 classes I took, this is probably the one where I need maybe the most work physically to experience what was going on. I had a little less ability to feel exactly what was going on, but I was getting the gist of it. And I think this is something that, again, that we discuss often in my group, particularly within my specific group in Atlanta, but there's other ways to describe it. And I think sometimes having multiple avenues of description gives people other ways to think about things. It's impromptu. I'm repeating myself. What he said. Now, the 3rd class was from some guy named, I don't know, some random guy, Kurt Hofstetter, something like that. My good friend, Kurt Holtfretter. And he did a quite nice class on his interpretation of what binding mechanics with sharp swords actually affects, and how, at least at the beginning, he was discussing much of how body mechanics in the actual movements described by Fiore de Laberi change how the swords interact and interplay and what you should do with that information on a crossing. Again, this now is weapons, but it is also about body movement and how Kurt sees defining jogo largo and jogo stretto. Not so much about being long or short distance. As he would say, the measure is determined by the location of the crossing on the sword. Punta at the tip, mezza spada fortezza. And then the other aspects of it being how you are controlling the opponent's weapon or the opponent himself. Now, he focused a lot on using the bind and being very proactive and decision-oriented in coming to the bind that you want to affect what you wish to do to the opponent. So again, this was new language for concepts that I know and teach and have been instructed in, but new language and new ways to think about the tactical and decision-making framework and the observational framework. So I thought it was very interesting. 3 different courses, 3 different instructors, 3 different base arts that all came at it from how to make observations and tactical decisions to influence your opponent. 2 of them were from binding or from crossing, and 2 of them were involving some form of body movement to control the crossing and control how you manipulated your opponent to your advantage. And I just thought that this was an interesting confluence. I don't think there was an overriding theme to the event, at least none that was expressed to me. It was just an interesting observation that all 3 of these very different people who study very different traditions, and I'm not certain that they talk to each other very much, but maybe some conversation could be had. Again, I mean, the art is the art. Swords do sword things. So it's not too surprising that we would find something like this, but nonetheless, it's pretty interesting. So, just a couple quick thoughts on an otherwise pretty nice event. I think I'll be coming sometime in the future. Maybe not the off year. It's a little hard to get this far north. I guess what I'm trying to say is I've done a lot of very long travel events this year. I'm not certain I want to repeat that every year. Maybe give it a year's rest on so much travel. But I think it's a worthwhile event. It's worth going to. It was very fun to experience. And people whom I know and love got a lot of good feedback and recognition. very well-deserved recognition. So, any last words? Moonfrog. War shit.